Time for another round of overrated or underrated. I'm going to read out a list of things, and you are going to tell me if they are overrated or underrated. First up, gravel conversions. So,
Underrated.
AKA drop bars and rigid fork on hard tails, suggested by Marco. So mountain bike geometry with drop bars. Is that what we're getting here?
Have you seen all the bikes at Leadville, which was historically a mountain bike race, cross country? Loads of people riding drop handlebars on their full suspension mountain bikes.
Right.
And it is very, very, very fast, as you can imagine, because you've got all of the comfort and shock absorption plus aero gains, which does make a difference when you're racing very, very fast. So that's kind of cool.
But the caveat to that is you're talking about fast on technical gravel.
Big gravel.
Yeah.
It's big gravel. It's cross country. Like, obviously, the lines are being blurred. But
My opinion on it is, personally, I do not love the look of it. However, I have absolutely no problem with it. And if people are into it and people... Like like an example you gave, if I was racing gravel, like properly racing technical gravel, I'd be like, yep, that's for me. Because it's going to, like, as you described, it's going to be fast.
yeah.
But I don't need it in my life, and it's not something that just appeals to me for just normal riding that I do.
Why do people dislike it? Because is the argument, why are you not just riding a hardtail mountain bike?
I think people think it's ugly. I think some people are really bad with change, and it's merging the drop bar world with a flat bar world.
It's like fusion cuisine, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Unbelievably, I don't understand why, but drop bar people and flat bar people in most cases are not the same people, and I don't understand.
It's like Anchorman, they meet up to fight in parking lots.
A bit of it must be the incompatibility of parts, because as much as Nick would not like to admit it, having in his bike shop, a lot of people go on the rides together, and he rides really aggressive gravel bikes with massive tire clearance, and for the northeast stuff that they call gravel, which isn't actually gravel. And a lot of that is because stocking one set of stuff in the shop, which is all drop bar and drop bar group sets and gravel group sets, is significantly easier and everything is compatible. Whereas if you add mountain bike stuff in, suddenly you have loads more standards and loads of different bottom brackets and boost and different suspension forks and all these things. And a lot of it doesn't interchange
Very true.
well.
That's probably where it comes from in the first place, isn't it? People wanting to get more into that scene.
Yeah.
But
I've got a cross-country mountain bike at home in my garage, and I'm like, I have spares for all of my road stuff, which you accumulate over time. And it's like, oh, great, I can just switch this on this and this and this. My mountain bike is like a completely different thing. You're like, oh, I need this bottom bracket or this type of tire.
I do feel like there is a lot of overlap that's coming through now, because you've got SRAM, which have got suspension. Well, it's not technically SRAM, is it? It's what's the mountain?
UDH, are you talking about?
No, what's the suspension fork company that SRAM own?
RockShox.
RockShox, yeah. So they've got a gravel suspension fork which doesn't have as extreme tire clearance. EE/Cane Creek have also got one as well. There's also, like, some of the mullet setups with SRAM are using mountain bike rear mechs, but with drop bar things. There is stuff that's crossing over now.
Oh, it'd be amazing if it was just all compatible one day.
did we say overrated, underrated?
Underrated. I think it's cool. And I've seen people do it for other reasons as well. Do you remember Nick Hussey, who was a business owner, and he was in Kingston Wheelers years ago, the first cycling club I ever joined. He crashed and had a very bad back at one point, and he made a bike which he called the Franken bike, which was drop handlebars on a full suspension system, so his back didn't get jarred around, and it was nice and high at the front. I think it had like a lefty fork on it, one of those Cannondale ones. A nice solution if you have an injury. So people should ride whatever works. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Underrated.
Next up, ex-pro team bikes, aka second-hand bikes from pro teams, suggested by Declan in Ireland.
I would not get one.
I wouldn't either.
It depends how in a pro cycling you are, I guess, doesn't
I
it?
would only get one if it was a wall bike.
Oh yeah. It's because they get 10 years worth of use in 1 year. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration.
They get crashed, they get thrown around, they get bashed, they get jet washed, They are not looked after in a way that is conducive to a long-term product. They jet wash all of the crap out of the bearings and then just replace the bearings. It's like they're not being looked after for longevity.
And presumably they're expensive.
No, the teams sell them off at like good prices sometimes. And some of the staff get first dibs.
It'll come down to who as well, won't it?
Yeah.
If you want to buy Pog's old bike, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to buy someone who I don't even know a name of a person, but it's a team bike, then you can probably get it.
And it's their training bike, things like that. You might get lucky and get one of those different carbon layups that's not available to the general public, but the team's actually riding races. But even then, speaking to Rob, that carbon expert man, you might not want that because it'll be really brittle and good for racing, but terrible for normal use.
I think overrated if you want it as an actual bike that you use. I think underrated if you want the memorabilia, because I think it is kind of cool having like a nice if you're the kind of person which is going to put bikes on the wall, having a bike like that on the wall is a really good talking piece. Like I've said it loads of times and I'll say it again. If I could get Marco Pantani's bike, not that I actually care there's just something about that period of time and those bikes.
Do you think he had a special carbon layup?
I'm definitely thinking about pre-carbon.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We did have a few emails from people sending you links to, I'm not sure if they're his, but they're replica bikes.
Why haven't you've got to let me know about these.
All right, okay, I'll send them to you.
I just want, it needs to be small. If it's a small size, which back then a small was probably a 58 centimeter top tube.
Yeah.
Then
get it. So we know what to get Jimmy for Christmas now as well.
Mint condition Marco Pantani bike.
Yeah. Francis, what you saying? Overrated, underrated?
Overrated. It's enticing, but it's probably a bad idea.
Fair enough.
Track stands, fixie or not, suggested by John.
Underrated.
Overrated.
Why? I'm not clipping in and out.
I know, because you do your cleats up so tight that you
once
can't.
I'm in, I clip in at the start of the ride, that's it. No unclipping.
Unnecessary. People probably and almost certainly fall off all of the time trying to look cool doing a track stand.
As we just discussed, I've never ever fallen off on a normal bike ride.
Yeah. I have nothing else to add.
Fair, go on.
Dave Grohl.
I don't consume very much news. So what has happened with Dave Grohl?
I think it's come out that he's had a child out of wedlock. Is that what you say? A love child.
Oh, is he?
I believe so.
Are we going to critique the artist or the art?
It's up to you. I put it in because it's some sort of news topical and we like to divert onto non-cycling topics on this show.
Musically, he's done some really cool stuff and is very iconic.
I was just listening to Song of the Dead,
but
that intro.
Still think he's overrated. And there is a time in my past where I would have said Dave Grohl's one of the greatest people in music of all time. But I've kind of moved on.
Song for the Dead?
Songs for the Dead. Song for the Dead? Songs. Maybe songs.
That is him, right? That album. Is why it sounds like Foo Fighters.
Drumming, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like Foo Fighters.
No, the production. It's like the cleanest album.
It sounds like Queens.
Well, it sounds like Queens of Stone Age, but produced
by Dave
completely different. Like it's a standout album, completely.
Yeah.
Can you play that intro?
If I learned it, yeah.
Jimmy is a drummer, everybody.
Yeah, I could. I don't want to, but I could.
And you're speaking as a drummer.
I'm saying overrated because he's like a god, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Overrated.
He's very good, but he's not a god.
You're using the Lachlan Morton analogy again.
Yeah, this is it, exactly.
He's very, very good, but he's not a god. Yeah. He's getting god status. It's coming.
Tea.
Overrated. It's just if you want a coffee, but instead of being nice, you just want it to be sadness. You have a tea.
I feel the opposite way.
Yeah, I do as well, actually.
You're less addicted to coffee.
Coffee is functional. I get up in the morning, I have a couple of coffees. Once I'm coffeeed out, it's much more pleasant having a tea than a coffee because, let's be perfectly honest, 100% of coffee tastes like ash. If you're not addicted to caffeine, why would you ever drink coffee? It is disgusting.
I've never
pleasant.
not been addicted to coffee.
And the reason I know this is from my Pro Plus phase.
Oh, I remember this. You just used to take Pro Plus instead of coffee.
I replaced coffee with Pro Plus, and what I learned from that is I was heavily addicted to caffeine, not coffee. Coffee is actually terrible to taste, but because so many of us are so addicted to caffeine, it convinces us that actually it's fantastic. It isn't. It tastes like ash. It's disgusting, but it still has a place in my life because I need it.
Tiramisu's nice. That's coffee.
It's not really though, is it? It's sugar and cream.
I wanted to put tea on there because I'm a tea lover and I hate coffee. And I think coffee has infiltrated the world market and tea hasn't.
I think it probably has.
But like America's a big place and they don't love it, do they?
I think a lot of Americans do drink tea.
Do they? Well,
Yeah.
Americans in the comments.
The problem is they don't have kettles though. That's what's holding them back.
I don't get this. Danny's got a kettle.
She does have a kettle.
Yeah, it's just a normal kettle. And I was like, oh, is it going to take ages to boil? And it does slightly, but not that much longer because their plugs are a different voltage or something.
Oh.
So you things like kettles, which are very intensive with electricity.
Does that mean they
with
can't have
power.
air fryers?
No, she has that as well.
Oh, okay,
it all
fine.
works. It just takes a little bit longer.
Oh.
Plugs aren't as good either. The plugs that look like little faces.
No, they're not as good.
They're not as good. The UK plug is god tier if we were to put it on the cool wall.
Agreed.
Underrated UK plug. My pal one of my best pals has lived in New York for absolutely ages. And when he's a big tea drinker, he is like a professional tea drinker, not literally. And I went and visited him when he'd been there for maybe like 18 months, 2 years, something like that. So ages and ages ago. And he was like basically used to just educate people on how to actually make tea and was like really like it was a big deal to him. Ultimately, a lot of Americans, apparently, maybe not anymore, used to make tea in a microwave. So you basically put water in a mug, do or don't put a tea bag in it, and then microwave it.
Oh.
100% of the time, that's going to make a terrible tea.
Agreed, yes. Yeah. To make a good tea, you have to have the right accoutrement.
It's already terrible. Overrated.
Thank you for your suggestions. If you want to suggest anything for overrated or underrated, please send it to wildonespodcast@cademedia.co.uk and we might read yours out on a future episode.